In terms then of the system overall, and I suppose our three guiding principles were that we had three main beneficiaries. We had the employer, the employee, and obviously ourselves in revenue. And really what we wanted for employers was that this new system would seamlessly integrate with their existing payroll processes. And in order to do that, we got rid of a lot of the admin functions associated with running payroll. So all of the P forms have been abolished. There are no changes to the payment dates or the payment processes. They remain exactly the same, but it does mean that the right tax will be paid on the current payment dates. For employees then, they will have access to simplified online services, and this will ensure that they are maximising the use of their entitlements. And for ourselves in revenue then, we now have statutory in-year monthly return, and hopefully it's going to make compliance easier from our perspective, where we can intervene much earlier if we see things are not quite right. So I suppose, where are we now? And I suppose January 2019 was the first full month of payroll submissions. The system went live on the 1st of the 1st. So at the end of January and moving now into February, we definitely have seamless integration with payroll. And we would say that we are about 3/4 of the way there, which is represented by my little green circle on the right there. We definitely are minimising the costs for employers to comply in terms of actually abolishing all of that admin process. And certainly we can see that tax is being paid on the current due dates, and that ultimately should result in time savings for employers. And certainly from the employers that we've been engaged with since the process went live, both at the end of December, where they were running their January payrolls, and into January, they're very happy with the processes and they've been able to use the system without any difficulties. In terms of the employee, the simplified online services will be made available around the end of March into April, and we purposely have held that back because we want employees to have at least 3 months information, whereby when they log on they will have meaningful information. Because for some people, if we gave it to them in January, they'll only have had one payment if they're monthly payers, and it really won't show them very much, whereby if you show somebody 3 months of information, it has more meaning for them. We certainly want them to maximise the use of their entitlements. And again, after the 3-month period, we will be able to see where people maybe haven't spread their credits, and we will be able to intervene and make suggestions for employees in terms of actually moving credits between employments. At the end of 2019 and into 2020, we are going to carry out an automatic end-of-year review for everybody. So as you can see, there's no work on that at the moment, but that will be happening at the end of the year. And employees will have real-time accurate data, and they will be able to see exactly what has been paid and deducted by their employer, should I say, every time they are paid. And it certainly will give them a level of transparency that they haven't had before. And that's actually very important for employees, because unfortunately we do have rogue employers out there who deduct PAYE and PRSI from employees, but never actually pay it over to revenue, and then their PRSI contributions do not become matched with their DEASP record. And generally it only comes to light where somebody maybe goes to make a claim for unemployment benefit, or maybe comes looking for a medical expenses refund, and it highlights the fact that no tax and PRSI has been paid. So the new system should eliminate a lot of that. And then in terms of ourselves, well, the first month's return is in, and we issued 201 statements to employers at the end of January into February there. On the 5th of February, the statements issued. It certainly will make compliance easier from our perspective, because we can now see what's happening both on a weekly, if somebody's paying weekly, or on a monthly basis, and we can look at that data and make sure that people are being taxed correctly and that the employer is returning all of the information. In terms of reducing customer contacts, obviously with any new system there has been an upsurge in customer contacts, and our employer helplines are receiving between 1,200 and 1,700 calls a day at the moment. Now we do expect that to reduce, because obviously there's a bedding in period where people are getting used to the system and getting used to maybe making their submissions. And particularly at the moment, there are also queries in relation to 2018 in terms of filing P45s, etc. So there are the two systems in operation at the moment until things bed down. And in terms of timely targeted interventions, at the moment, we're not focusing on compliance type interventions, apart from following up with people to make sure that they understand what their requirements are. But certainly, as time moves on, there will be a penalty regime, there will be interest, so people do need to make sure that they get things right now in the earlier parts of this year. In terms of context then, I suppose this is just a figure that I took from the end of January, being our very first month. We've had 842,000 RPN requests by employers. So that's where employers have been pulling down requests for their employees for RPNs. That represents 151,000 unique employers. We've had 353,000 successful payroll submissions, and that represents over 2.2 million employees. That also represents 2.3 million employments. So that's where you would have some people who are working 2 or 3 jobs, but their information has been returned under each of those. We've also seen all types of payroll sizes being successfully submitted, from the very largest ones, which would be the likes of the Department of Education or the HSE, right down to the single employer with just 1 employee, all having made successful payroll submissions. Just, I suppose, to remind people of their obligations under the new system, every employer is obliged to commence or cease their employees on the payroll software system. If they're not using payroll, then they must do that through the ROS system. Or if they are paper, where they have had an exemption from e-filing, they can do it via the paper method. They must request a revenue payroll notification every time they go to pay an employee, and this is to ensure that they're using the most up-to-date RPN and that the person's tax credits and rate bands are correct. Then, before paying their employees, they must submit the pay and tax details via their payroll submission or through the online ROS service. Then, once the statement has issued to them, which will be around the 5th of the following month, they need to reconcile that with their own payroll records and make sure that their systems are matching with what they have submitted to revenue. If there are any errors or if the statement is incorrect, they are legally obliged to fix that, and that usually means that they have to go in and either make a correction to a submission or correct in the following month. The end of year return, the P35, is now gone, and the last one has now been filed, hopefully. And then after that, every month is now a statutory return. So there isn't an end of year tidy up, and certainly that's something that employers need to look at. They don't have the facility to tidy things up, catch things that maybe they haven't caught throughout the year, particularly the likes of BIK payments, etc. They now need to be returned every single month. If there happens to be a persistent technology failure, we do have legislation to cover that. And once the system comes back on and they can verify that it was a technological failure, there's no problem with resubmitting when the system comes back on live. And then from 2019, the employers will no longer have to provide a P60 to their employees. And I have some slides to show you what will be available to employees as we get through the presentation. So the payroll reporting options, and for yourselves where you're using payroll software, you will be using the direct payroll reporting mechanism, whereby your payroll is communicating with revenue in a seamless way. Some of you may be operating for 2 or 3 payroll systems, and sometimes that happens. You may also be using the ROS reporting, which means you will upload files and get the RPNs and then download the information and put that into your software, similar to what you would have done with your P2Cs. If you are managing somebody that has no payroll software, then through the ROS online system, you must request RPNs and submit your pay and payroll deductions for employees using that ROS facility. So I suppose just reviewing the payroll information and what you will see on screen. Error messages are sent automatically via the revenue system through the payroll software, and you will get them back when you've made a submission. If there are inaccuracies, the message will tell you what the inaccuracy is. If you have used an out-of-date RPN, you will get a warning, and you should go and check and see where the latest RPN is or why you haven't had the updated version applied within your software. And if you make a correction, the original submission that you have made plus the corrected submission will be available to you to view. So I have just put up a couple of the screenshots to show you what some of these errors and submission errors look like. So you'll see here, this is a payroll submission, and it shows there in the submission results that the status is completed. So you can see out on the right-hand side that there was a correction and that there are 2 invalid items. Now, an invalid item will generally relate to a PPSN either being incorrect, or maybe somebody has created a duplicate record and submitted the information twice. As you can see in this one, it appears that there was a duplicate record created for 2 people. So the employer would need to go back in and check what has happened there and either delete, or if it's correct, then a second employment ID should be assigned to the second record, whereby maybe the person has 2 roles or 2 separate payments within the same employment. Down the bottom of the screen there, you'll see the correction. So they've gone in, the previous item down the bottom was for €100, I think, and then they've gone in and corrected, and now the income tax is 22. Don't take those figures as actual tax calculation figures. They're purely from a test system, so they won't have been set up to show what an accurate tax deduction would be. It's purely for graphical information. So that's just to give you an idea of what they look like. In terms then of something that is actually invalid, that will come up, as you can see on the screen there, invalid items. You can see it has 2. And when you click out on the right-hand side, you can go in and view each of those. And again, that will tell you, is the PPSN incorrect or has a duplicate line being created? So this is just the one that I had shown you previously, but just so that you can see it a little bit clearer. And again, once you go in there and click view on the right-hand side, it brings you into the line detail for that actual submission. The statement then is what is required to be viewed at the end of the month. And for the screenshot that I have here, I've just put up 4 months of statements. So if you look at the bottom one, which was January's statement, this was deemed. And what that means is the employer didn't go on and accept the statement. So revenue deemed that as the person's liability. And that's absolutely fine. There's no requirement to go on and accept the statement, but the majority of the employers will go on and check and make sure that they're happy and click the accepted button. So then out on the right-hand side, you can view the return or make a payment. And most definitely where you have a direct debit instruction set up, you need to go and actually authorize that payment so that there's a revenue direct instruction there, but you physically have to go and make that payment, the same as you would have done when you were submitting your P30s. The next one then, there was no liability, so maybe for that particular month the employer didn't have any staff, and that could be a seasonal business, and that's absolutely fine. The employer went on and accepted that nil return. In the next one then, again, there's €570 there of a liability. The employer was happy with that and went on and accepted it. And again, the option to make a payment is out on the right-hand side. And then the monthly statement, which we will say is this month's, is now available to view or accept. So when you click on to that, it brings up that particular month's statement. And up in the top box, you will see what has gone into making up that statement, the period that it covers, and if you need to see the payroll submission details, where the little magnifying glass is there with the payroll details, once you click on that, you can actually get into the line detail of each of the submissions that went into making up that month's return. And then you have the option there to agree with the above summary, or as I said, if you do nothing, we will deem it as your return. If you need to make a correction, you should go on and make your correction in the period between the 5th and the 23rd of the month before the payment is due. Payment options then. So I suppose I've just put this up here to remind people of the options that are available for payment. So there's no change to the payment dates. It's the 14th of the following month or the 23rd of the following month where you're filing online. Quarterly or annual remitters remain paying quarterly or annually, but every time they run their payroll, they must submit the payroll information for their staff. The fixed direct debit scheme remains the same, and that's where there's already an agreement with Revenue for a fixed amount to be paid on a monthly basis. And then we have a variable direct debit, which is where you can sign up to have whatever your liability amount is automatically paid on a variable direct debit. And that went live on the 25th of January. And up on the Revenue website, we have details and guidance on how to set that up. And it's quite straightforward. You do it through Ross, but all of the details are up there in terms of setting that up if somebody wants to do that. Payments can be made in various different ways. When you select make a payment, you can use your credit card, a debit card, a bank account, or the Revenue Direct instruction. Then payments and refunds is there as an option as well, and the variable direct debit. And certainly some of the questions that we get asked quite a lot are in relation to being able to do offsets. So where maybe somebody has a VAT overpayment and they want to offset that amount against their PAYE liability. And as before, there's no change to that, and that can still happen through exactly the same mechanism. Just to give you an idea of how the variable direct debit screens look, and I haven't put up all of them here, but again, this is how you will select to make a variable direct debit. So select a direct debit type, and then you go into variable direct debit, and it lets you click a drop down there, and you can choose to make and receive payments to and from revenue using your bank account details. And then it creates a mandate. So again, you're authorizing revenue to be able to deduct the amounts from your bank account. So again, it is different from an RDI. It's an actual direct debit. The RDI is where you have to go in on a monthly basis and authorize the amount that has to be deducted. And again, it's just asking for various details. What are the PREM registration numbers that this is now going to apply to? And you have the options to click and add those there. And you can just add to the mandate. And then it just gives you various details that you need to fill in there, the account holder, the address, etc. And then obviously the originator details and where it's going to. And then you're declaring that you're authorizing the Revenue Commissioners to do this instruction. And then you'll get a summary screen, which unless you've made an error, you can correct, but if everything is okay, you will simply click yes and submit it. And you're declaring then that you're accepting this as a direct debit and that you understand the terms and conditions applying to this. And then you must sign it with your Ross password. So again, that's an important part because that's part of the authorization. In terms of PPSNs, the PPSN is extremely important in terms of actually running your payroll and making sure that you have the correct RPNs for everybody that you're going to pay. There is a PPSN checker available in Ross, and it allows you to check up to 10 PPSNs at any one time. And it's very simple to use. When you've signed into Ross, the PPSN checker is there on the home page. You put in the personal details, name, address, etc., date of birth, and then you can add up to 10 employees. There is some security CAPTCHA details there that you need to fill in. You submit that and it brings you back that either the person's PPSN is valid or invalid. If it's valid, it says based on the information held by Revenue, you can now go ahead and use this PPSN. If it's invalid, it suggests that you go back to the employee and check and verify that the details that they've given you match with how they have actually registered with Revenue. Because maybe the person has registered with Revenue before they got married and you're now using their married name, or they've moved address, or they've given you an incorrect digit in their PPSN. So again, just need to verify the basic details there. Business processes, and I suppose I can't stress enough the fact that there has been a significant change from what was an end of year process to now a monthly statutory return. And it is very important that the pay frequencies are timely and accurate and that the information is submitted each and every time you run and pay your employees. There isn't an end of year tidy up, that process is gone. So what you were doing at the end of the month, you now have to do on a monthly basis and make sure that everything is timely and accurate. It's important to realise that everything you're doing is very visible. It's visible to ourselves in Revenue, but it's also visible to your employees. And from the end of March into April, employees will be able to see their information. And it's very important that they can reconcile what's on the Revenue system with what's on the payslip that you have provided to them. Corrections, we know corrections are part of running payroll. People don't feed information in correctly or on time, or somebody has fat fingered to zero and everybody's got paid that extra €1,000. We know things need to be corrected, and that's built in terms of the systems, the payroll software, and both the revenue facilities. And there are guidance up there in terms of managing corrections and the types of corrections and how to correct them on the revenue website. If when you get back your statement, it isn't correct, you are legally obliged to fix the underlying data that has come in from those submissions to ensure that the return reflects the correct liability for the month and for what you have paid your employees. Everything that you submit to us does feed into Revenue's risk analysis systems. And as I said, at the moment, we are absolutely trying to help people, make sure the process beds in, make sure everybody is fully aware of their obligations. But as time moves on, we will be carrying out compliance, we will be carrying out audits, and certainly, at that point in time, it's very important that everybody is au fait with the system and understands their reporting requirements. Net pay is something that we would discourage at all costs, and particularly now because with the new system, you actually have the person's tax credits and rate bands available at the time that you're going to pay them. If you have somebody on a net pay arrangement, I would suggest that you remove that facility and tax them correctly month to month or week to week based on the information that we submit to you. If we go out and we do an audit and we identify that maybe the person hasn't been taxed correctly, you as an employer will be liable for the shortfall, and that amount can also be regrossed. So that is a double whammy for employers, and really the best option to prevent yourselves having an exposure to an additional liability is to make sure that you don't agree net pay arrangements when you're taking somebody on. The revenue payroll notification is only valid for the year in which it is issued. Employees must be registered for PAYE in order for an employer to receive a 2019 RPN for them. And that's particularly important where somebody is a brand new employee into the state, or they have never worked in the state before. They have to go on and register their own employment at the outset. Where no RPN is returned from revenue, then the employee must be taxed on an emergency basis. And there are new emergency tax provisions which are applying per the revised regulations. And I've included them there. So if the employee does not provide you with a PPSN number, they get no cut-off points and no tax credits. Where they provide you with a PPSN number, but they are not correctly registered with revenue, for the first 4 weeks, they will get a cut-off point, but no tax credit. And then again, same if they're paid monthly. So again, that should encourage them to get a PPSN number and make sure that you have it in order to pay them. If you have somebody that you don't have a PPSN for, you can still continue to pay them, but you must assign an employer reference number to that payment on every payroll submission. And that's a unique number that's created either by your payroll software, or if you're not using payroll software, it's a number you need to create yourself. You must include that on every submission until you receive the PPSN for that employee. And then when you have the person's PPSN and you submit that to revenue, we will be able to match that with the previous payments and make sure their tax credits and rate bands are adjusted accordingly, and you will get an RPN for them. Very quickly, just looking at Regulation 12 in relation to benefit in kind, and I suppose what we would be saying to everybody is that they need to review their BIK monthly, but at least quarterly, because bearing in mind you now have a statutory monthly return, particularly for the likes of company cars, whereby most employers would have reviewed them September, October time to get ready for an end of year process, but now that should be reviewed at least quarterly. What we would say is notional pay can be reported the day the notional payment is made, or the earlier of the next payday, or the 31st of December if it's a payment in December of that year. Employers must include a best estimate of the value of any benefit and make sure that that amount is included in the relevant payroll submission. And then when the actual value of benefits become available, any adjustment should be included in the next payroll submission to revenue. So that applies for share-based remuneration, for shadow payroll, or for anybody who's in receipt of taxable expenses. So again, it's a business process that employers need to look at and review. Common errors then, and I suppose these are just issues that we have identified where employers or the payroll software maybe hadn't given enough guidance to the users in terms of what they were supposed to do. So certainly we had looked for all employers to send us in details of their employees before the end of October last year. In a lot of cases, we sent back invalid files, or we asked employers to correct some of the information that they had submitted. Where they haven't done that, they have not received RPNs for their employees. And they need to go back and look and make sure that those staff are correctly registered, that they have the correct PPSN for them, or maybe they genuinely should be ceased from that employment. We've also seen cases where somebody has requested an RPN maybe 2 weeks before running the payroll, and then in the interim, something has changed on the person's RPN, but the employer didn't re-request an updated RPN. So again, not using the most up-to-date RPN for an individual. So what we would suggest is, as you are about to run the payroll, you check that you have the most up-to-date RPN. We've also seen issues where they're not using the direct reporting system, whereby they've gotten the RPNs from revenue, but they didn't know that they had to upload them into their software to be able to actually use them. So that certainly seems to have been an issue. And then we have seen occasions where somebody has gone in and overwritten the RPN. So they've been given the tax credits and rate bands as per the revenue information, but they've decided that these are not right or not correct and have overwritten the RPN. The RPN that we have issued is based on the most up-to-date information that we hold for that particular employee, and the employer is obliged to operate that RPN. If there is an issue with that RPN, the employee needs to contact revenue and we will adjust or amend as required. We've also seen where people have been inserting incorrect tax year and header on the 29 submission. So maybe putting in 2018 and it's actually 2019. So again, just things to be careful of where, you know, simple errors can actually cause the file to be invalid. Invalid items then, the main reasons are that the pay date must be within the 2019 tax year. Duplicate line items where maybe somebody made a submission and then made another submission for the exact same amount and has created a duplicate, and that will increase their liability on their statement. So they absolutely need to go back and check those duplicate line items. And then they may have selected the invalid number of pay periods. So maybe somebody is monthly paid, but they've actually selected 52 pay periods rather than 12. So again, just to make sure that basic checks are carried out before actually submitting the payroll. Emergency tax then, and certainly employers should be looking up RPNs. If you don't get an RPN for an employee, then try on, depending on what the software system is making available to you, but some of them have new RPN request where you have a new employee and use the details are returned. Even if those details are 0, that is what should be used because that is reflecting the correct revenue position at that point in time. You need to make sure that your software is updating with the detail of the new RPN each and every time. And again, as I said, make sure if it's nil, you use nil. For corrections and deletions, we've now seen employers starting to make corrections and deletions. We have been receiving calls on how to do this in the software or where the software doesn't support it. So again, if there are issues, you need to go back to the software provider and make sure that they have built in a facility for you to be able to correct, or that you understand what the process is in terms of making those corrections. Make sure that the payroll run summary is reviewed after a correction or a deletion, as some employers again are doubling up on submissions. You can correct just line data, you don't have to correct the full submission. Again, we've seen issues where pay dates that had payments made in 2018 and also pay dates in December 2019, where people have mixed up again the pay periods. The employment ID Duplicate employments being set up where a new RPN request and payroll submission have different employment IDs. 2 new RPN requests received with different employment IDs. So again, where people are confusing what an employment ID is used for, and it's to signify that the person has 2 employments with the same employer. So that's the only time the employment ID should be different from their main employment. I suppose in terms of ourselves, we're still engaging with employers and we're attending quite a lot of events ongoing. We've participated in quite a few webinars with various different payroll providers and the likes of Pimbrook, etc. We've been out meeting with the CPA. We have 2 events next week with the ACCA, and certainly we've been engaged with IPAS as well in terms of the payroll providers. We did 30 dates with them between the end of November, December and into January. And certainly we will continue to attend as many events and conferences as possible to ensure that people understand how the system is working, and maybe to make sure that people who haven't yet come on board get things up and running and get things correct before the penalty regime, etc., kicks in. So I suppose just to give you an idea of what an employee is going to be able to see, and at the moment some of these screens are already available. So in this case, the person has an active employment. And again, you have to bear in mind this is just a test screen at the moment. So the person has an active employment in the top box there, and it gives them what their current tax credits are for that particular employment. And if they click into view under that first employment, this is what they're now going to see. So they will see each payroll submission and their gross pay, and then the various statutory tax deductions that have been taken there. And then they can go in and view the actual line detail of that data. So again, it's available to them for each and every employment that they're going to have. And that part of the screen will be made available towards the end of March and into April. So in order to get rid of the P45, and again, I suppose this is probably some of the questions that you may get asked currently, because if people are leaving, they're used to getting P45s and there's no longer a P45 available for them. So their previous pay and tax details, once they're ceased in their current employment, will be made available to their new employer, and the new employer can request a revenue payroll notification. The employer will include a commencement date or a cessation date which will register or cease the employment. If they are first-time employees in the state, they must register on My Account in order to create the new employment in the first place. Anything that's required for DEASP payments will be made available to DEASP on cessation of employment. So again, somebody maybe that's going to claim unemployment benefit would be used to getting a P45 and turning up in their local welfare office with that P45. We now have an automatic feed nightly, both backwards and forwards to DEASP in terms of payments or somebody ceasing in an employment. And if somebody needs to print out a cessation detailed statement, and generally it's for somebody maybe who's going back to another foreign country and where the Foreign Tax Administration looks for their previous pay and tax details, and they may be looking for a double taxation credit when they go back to their home country, what they can print down is what you can see there on the screen. So it just shows where they worked, the period that they worked from and to, the total gross pay, and all of the deductions, and that employment is now ceased. And then when they go to print it, it prints out in an official format with the HARP, etc. on it, and that will be accepted in terms of a statement of cessation. In terms of replacing the P60 then, we will issue an end of year statement to everybody at the end of 2019, and that will contain all of the earnings for that year from all employments. So it's a much more comprehensive way of having all of your income for the year. And this will be utilised in the same way as currently for the P60 for income verification by financial institutions, by the HSE, by SUSI grants, county councils, anywhere that looks for P60 type information. The 2019 tax credit cert that issued to all employees also gave them information about PAYE Modernisation. So it did explain to them the employer reporting obligations, the ceasing and changing employments, and how they can go and access jobs and pensions, and provides details of My Account services. So there is a tab up on the Revenue website, PAYE Modernisation for employees. And again, there's a huge amount of information there, particularly for those that might be affected now by not getting a P45. In terms of just summarising then how you're going to comply with your employer obligations, making sure that you have the right PPSN for all of your employees, making sure that you are requesting the most up-to-date revenue payroll notification before running your payroll, making sure that you are submitting the right amount of pay, the payment date and the correct amount of income tax, USC, PRSI and LPT, that you're reconciling the revenue's response against your payroll totals, that you've reviewed your benefits or your notional pay. Encourage your employees to register for My Account and get them to verify their tax credits and rate bands are correct. And if you have not made your January or February submission, you will be contacted to verify the current position. There's a huge amount of information available, both from a Ross perspective. We have a Ross Help Centre there that's up on the website, and certainly there's a telephone number for the Ross Help Desk as well, and they're well able to deal with any of the likes of Ross certificate inquiries, or maybe where something is invalid from a technical perspective, they'll be able to give you guidance and help. In terms of PAYE modernisation information, up on the website, under employing people, we have a tab there that's constantly updated. On the National Employer Help Desk then is the first port of call for any inquiries, and that's the national phone number there. Up on the website as well, we have a hot topic section, so if we see something that appears to be an error out there where people are making a lot of the same issue, same mistake, we have a hot topic section up on the website which is updated constantly as well. And then My Inquiries, if you have something that's more complex or you're not getting an answer from the employer helpline, that you need to put it down in writing, use the My Inquiries facility, and we'll certainly try and get back as soon as possible. So that's it from myself.
That's brilliant, Sinead. Very comprehensive. Certainly learned a few additional things myself there. So delighted. What we want to do is I want to just introduce Sharon there on a little piece around the Sage Payroll, just to complement some of what Sinead is saying there.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Sinead. So I'm going to go through some of the modernisation from the payroll side, from the software side, and how it can help and eliminate some of the maybe issues that you may have. So first of all, we're going to go just briefly touch on employees setting up, just to make sure everyone is setting them up correctly. Reconciling your revenues, your payroll to your revenue statement, and if you've got different pay methods, how to reconcile. Viewing your log files, backing up your data, and of course it's going to be more important now than ever that you're backing up your data and the different version releases that we have in the software and your common queries. So first of all, I'm going to go through in setting up a new employee. And again, you know how to set up an employee on a weekly basis. You need to go into Edit Employees, click on New, and ensure you have the relevant details, you know, employees' names, PPS number, address, and so on, everything you need to process a payroll. But from Revenue, if you've got a new employee, you need to make sure that you have your start date in, and also to make sure that you set them up on emergency. So as soon as you have them set up and set them up on emergency, when you retrieve the RPN, they will get the relevant new up-to-date RPN. And as Sinead was saying, you do that every week to have the most up-to-date RPN on your software. And if you have a look at the RPN, when you retrieve the RPN there, it'll give you the before and after. So what's on your payroll, and that's moved from emergency to a week one basis. So that'll depend on the individual. Okay, so once you have registered, once you have your payroll done and you process and you're doing your submissions every week, you need to be able to reconcile your submissions with Revenue. So of course you have the old-fashioned report, which is, you know, the old P30 report, which will give you the monthly figures that you have. But you might have a crossover date. So if you have a day happens to fall on the first of the following month, that needs to be in on that submission. So if you go in, you could run your report. So you go into reports and you've got your gross to net report. And if you click on preview on that report, you can actually run that report within certain pay periods. So you can select your date range that you want to run it from. So in this case, period 1 to 4, and that will give you your totals for that pay period. And that should match what's on your payroll submission, the totals at the bottom. Now you may have a scenario where you have different pay methods. So you could be paying someone by check, someone by cash, and they're all different pay dates. And if you are, you need to separate them out. Now we have designed a report for you to use, and you can contact us to get this, and you get this through your ARW. So when you're in your ARW report, we'll drop in this report that we've designed, and it's your PSR by payment method. And again, you can run that report and you can select whether you have a filter you will want to run between periods. So between, again, periods 1 and 4, and if you click on Excel, it'll put it out into Excel for you. And that'll give you the totals as you see here. So it'll give you the totals for your cash, your pay path, and your check. So it'll give you a breakdown of each one, which will then you have your grand totals, which also will match your submission. So when you're looking at your log files on your payroll, you want to be able to view your log files to see if your submissions have gone, if you've retrieved your RPNs. So again, within your software this time, if again, you go back into your software and you go in to view your RPN log, if you go to the top into direct payroll reporting and RPN, you can view your logs within here. So when you click on view log, you'll be able to see any previous log within your payroll. And again, once you click on export the details, so it'll give you the pay date, it'll give you the pay period, the period date, the number of employees on it, and you can export the log. And if you export, it'll just give you a summary of what you have retrieved on that RPN. And the same with your submission log. So if you want to review what's been submitted to revenue on your payroll, you can go into the software. And again, if you go to direct payroll reporting, payroll submission, and you can view your payroll log within there. And again, it'll show you any previous logs that you've done, if they've completed. So it's giving you the status, the period date. And again, you can export the details here, which will give you a more detailed breakdown. And again, it'll give you each individual. So you can have a look through, and it'll be a list of pages if you've got multiple employees on your payroll. Okay, so following that, more importantly than ever, you need to be backing up your system. If for any reason that your PC crashes or you get a virus or anything happens, your data, you need to be able to restore your backup back to what you have submitted to revenue. And again, it's more important than ever. So the first thing I would recommend that you do is have a look and see where your payroll is installed. So if you go into help and into system information, you can have a look on your data directory where your data is. Now, in this case, my data is on the C drive, so I'd recommend that you back up somewhere else, maybe back up to a server or an external hard drive, memory stick, somewhere off this machine. So again, if this machine dies, that you have a copy of your data somewhere else. And to take a backup, if you go into miscellaneous and backup, and you can browse, you get your backup screen. And again, you can type in if you know where you want to back up to the destination, or you can click on 3 buttons at the side and you'll be able to browse to where you want to back up to. Now again, this is where I'd recommend that you have a tree of where you want to back up to. So you have your payroll backups, you have each year, each company, and then you have a breakdown of each period. And if you need to restore back to any of these periods, then they are available to you. And it should match again exactly what you've submitted to revenue at that stage. Okay, and once you're happy with that, you can click on backup, click OK, and it should tell you that you have successfully backed up your data. Okay, and you click OK. So since the beginning of the year, we've had a number of payroll updates, and you can check what version you're on by going into Help and About on your software. So if you go into Help and About, you should see your version number there. And I said from the beginning of the year, so in December, we had our first release, which brought you up to version 22.0.65.602. This version there was an issue with levers in December that weren't showing up on the P35, and that fixed that issue. So the second release then was in January, and that brought you up to version 22.0.65.604. And again, that brought you in, that had a couple of different environmental changes. But one of the main ones was there was an issue with tax credits on 4 weekly, fortnightly, bi-monthly and quarterly payrolls, and it fixed that, and also then introduced to show the CWPS on your submission for pensions. So it's showing, it brought in that figure. Okay, and then we had a third release, which was issued this month, and that should bring you up. So your latest version, and should be your current version, should be version 22.1.66.400. And it again had a couple of different issues. One of them, which was a really annoying pop-up box that came onto your software every time you logged in. And if you tick on the don't show this message again and close it, it still came up. So that is fixed. So if you tick the box to don't show it, show and close, the next time you come in, it won't show. Okay, there was a few other things and just some wording within the software. So when you went to submit, the button was disabled because there may have been error messages there that you had to correct before you continued. So just change the wording at the bottom. You can see that for more information and resolving the errors, you can click more. To print or save the details on the errors, you can export the details. And to exit the panel and resolve the errors, you click cancel. Also improved wording on the RPNs. It just gave you that there was no RPNs to be imported, but you didn't know whether it connected or not. So it's changed again. So you have successfully connected to Ross. Your RPNs are currently up to date and they're required, no changes are required. To continue processing, click close. And of course, that was the third thing that changed. That was a cancel button, which brought you back out. So that was changed to close at the bottom of your screen there. So it also has a few of the warnings that would have been on the software. So if you have negative values on your RPNs, they will not be imported into your payroll. So for your pay or income tax to date, your pay, your USC or your USC to date. So if you have any of these, they will not be imported. And this is just to prevent any of the users having an error status on the payroll. These fees are used for the calculation of a previous employment and is the information in the Sage Payroll. So it looks at the employee who was previously employed in the company for the calculation. So if the revenue do not provide this information on the next RPN, it would result in negative amounts being imported into payroll. So therefore it won't be imported. And you can see on the RPN when you're imported, you have asterisks there beside certain fields. So anything with 1 asterisk, it will be amended. Anything with 2 asterisks is only for information only. And anything with 3, it will not be amended, but it's just letting you know that there is a negative value there. And again, you need to talk to revenue or the employee to fix these queries. So a couple of the common queries that we have been having, and as Sinead said earlier within from the revenue side, that they're getting a lot of duplicate line items, which is one of the error messages that we are getting. And again, from the software side, if you're getting these, generally you've done a submission already. So again, you can check with your revenue, with your log screen to see if there's a submission already gone up, and you can log into revenue to see if the submission is already there and rectify or continue if you already have. Now, if you have forgotten to do a submission, which seems to be quite common at the moment, you can go back in through the software from a technical point of view to redo the submission. Now, just bear in mind that this will result in a fine in the future, but for legislation reasons, you need to be doing your submission before payment is made. Okay, so again, to log into your software, you can log in as admin, okay, and go into miscellaneous and period archive and revert to, and you'll have a list of your companies that you can select from a drop-down menu here, and a list of the pay periods that are available for you to revert. So if you select the relevant period and click on revert, the software will revert back to that period within that company. Okay, if we log in and log into the company, okay, enter your username and log in. And again, you have the option now to do the submission again. So you can click on your submission file and follow through your wizard. So you click on submit, you check your values that you're happy with them and submit. Okay, so you're still in your archive. Okay, so just be aware of that. You are in your archive at the bottom. So you need to, when you finished your submission, you can log back into your payroll, your current period, by going to miscellaneous and period archive, and go to current period and revert. And that will bring you back to your current period. So if you do need to redo submission, you can, but you do through the archive company. Now, within the payroll as well, if an employee leaves and they leave it in the current period, you can mark the, or finishing within the current period, you can mark the timesheet as you normally would for a leaver. But in some cases, they may have left in a previous period. And again, you need to mark the software as finish date and finish period so they don't come up every week. However, this is going to be introduced into future releases within the software. But currently you need to log into Revenue and you need to enter in finish date and finish period within the employee's log. So just change the date of leaving within there manually as well. There is going to be future updates within the software. The next release is due in April, and we'll give you more up to date when we have more information on that. Okay, now we're going to open up to some questions. If anybody has any questions there on the panel, you can write it in your chat box and we can answer them all.
That's brilliant. Very much there, Sharon. Okay, so we'll have a look for some questions there. Right, I have to get my glasses on. Where is our chat here? Right. One question there that I was just looking at there was the log file there. I mean, it's something, do you find that people are actually using it? Because actually I had myself to use it there yesterday. Is it something that they should put in the checklist till they start getting, I suppose, familiar with the new routine, just to know that they have actually connected to Revenue, the submission has been made, the RPNs have been taken?
When you submit the file on the software, you should get confirmation with a submission ID, which will also match with what's on your ID with Revenue. So if you need to go back to Revenue and check your log files on both, you will have an ID number there that should correspond with each other.
So what we've experienced so far is if we get the ID number on the payroll, then we'll be pretty confident that submission is made. Do you think where the problem has been is that people haven't been waiting for that submission? I mean, Sinead as well, have you found that people think they've submitted but not?
Yeah, certainly we've had a lot of queries whereby we've contacted people to say, we note you haven't made your submission, and then they go, oh, I just hadn't pressed the final submit button, I have everything ready. So I think people are just a little bit apprehensive. It's a new system and it's quite final in terms of what they're actually, you know, submitting. So what we would say is, you know, go ahead, make your submission. If when the statement comes back to you, there's a problem, you have the opportunity to correct it, or you can contact the employer helpline if it's something that you need some assistance with.
Okay.
Okay, there's a question coming through there about the submissions. There's another question coming through there about the submission. At the moment, it seems that we can only see the last 3 returns made. I don't see how that would be. You should be able to see all your submissions that you've done within the log files. So if you go back up to the top of your software, you should be able to go into the logs for the submission, direct payroll reporting, payroll submission, and view your log submissions. If you can't see them, just give the guys a call in support and we can have a look at that for you. But you should be able to see all your logs.
And you should be able to see them on the Revenue site as well. So
yeah.
Each submission is visible. Each submission is visible when you click on payroll details, and you should be able to see submission that you've made as well. Okay,
so if you give us a call, we can have a look and see why your returns, if the returns aren't there, maybe they didn't go through or they weren't completed. Okay, is there a way to look at returns for a full month or on 4 or 5 week returns? Yes, you can. You can run your reports, your gross to net reports by certain periods, which will give you the totals. Or again, that ARW report, and if anyone needs that report, they can just give us a call and we can arrange to get a copy of that through to you. Has anyone experienced any delay in viewing the reports immediately after submitting them? Now, I don't see, I know even from support, people ringing in when they're viewing their submission, they can log on to revenue straight away and they're there. There doesn't seem to be.
Well, yeah, thanks, Sharon. I had an issue myself directly there yesterday, and I had done a submission while on the phone to revenue, and the lady was able to tell me straight away that she could see it. So if there's anything in particular you might want to just give us a shout in, and we can help you, or give revenue a shout directly.
Okay, there's another one there. Are multiple out of date RPNs going to log communication for revenue, Sinead?
Yeah, I suppose at the moment what we're trying to do is make sure that people are requesting RPNs each and every time they run their payroll. Now, if they are continuously getting an out-of-date RPN message, they need to go in and look at that, because as time moves on, we will be looking at it and certainly making contact with the employer to see why they haven't used the most up-to-date one. Again, under the legislation, they are required to apply the most up-to-date tax credit information for each employee. So while at the moment, as I've said, we're doing a bedding in period, but really if they're getting error messages with out-of-date RPNs, they should be going back in and requesting the correct RPN and applying it to the payroll, or correcting the payroll where the tax credits have obviously changed.
Okay, perfect. Okay, okay, sorry, I have another question there. Assuming existing employees from 2018 on the payroll, do they need to register for My Account?
Well, the best option for each employee is that they have a My Account registration, because as we move forward, more and more items are going to be e-enabled. So particularly for at the end of the year when they don't get a P60, the easiest way for them to view their end of year statement is to look at My Account. Also, for making any claims, refunds, medical expenses, the quickest way to get a refund in terms of your medical expenses is through My Account, where refunds are processed 2 to 3 days. Whereas if you're physically sending something in to us in writing, it's at least 20 days minimum. And at the moment, because obviously we have a huge amount of information coming in from the PAYE Modernisation employers and employees, those dates are probably a little bit longer than 20 days. So really the best option, the most efficient option for all employees is to have a My Account. And certainly we're going to be having an advertising campaigns kicking off shortly in terms of encouraging people to register for My Account, making it as simple as possible, and making sure that people understand what information they can view now from their employer's payroll.
I'm conscious of time there, so we've questions that we may not have gotten to, but we will get back to you directly. We have them all recorded there. One thing I'd like to finish on, Sinead, there is something that I think might have been missed, and certainly I've noticed it, is the variable direct debit. I'd like to stress that point to people, is where those slides that Sinead had shown you earlier on is to go in and ensure there's no point in going 90% of the way and doing all the compliance that we need to do, and yet we're not paying the bill, and yet you could have been the best payers last year. So just maybe pick up on those slides, people, and just ensure, log on to revenue and ensure you have that direct debit set up so that you are paying as well as reporting. So I'm conscious of time. They're going to wrap up. I'm going to thank Sharon and Sinead there for joining us. Please get in touch with us, and we will be continuously feeding out information. I have to say, anybody who's heard me before, I'm very positive about the modernisation. I have worked with it just in the last month myself. I do think it's going to be easier. It's a new routine and habit. I think we've all just got to adjust to, but fingers crossed over the next month or two, we'll all start to see the benefits. We've left the contact details up there for you. We'll leave them there for another minute. But again, thank you very much for all of your time this morning.